May 7th, 1915. The Irish Sea lies flat as glass, and beneath that surface, a German submarine is waiting. On the water above, RMS Lusitania, the pride of the British Empire, cuts forward at more than 18 knots. Nearly 240 meters long, 4 black and ochre funnels rising high, interiors as lavish as a 5-star hotel drifting across the Atlantic. On board are 1,959 people, American businessmen, children, artists, millionaires, immigrants, and passengers simply trying to cross the ocean while war consumes Europe. They know there is danger. They board anyway, because Lusitania is no ordinary ship. When she was launched in 1906, she symbolized British power, the fastest liner in the world, massive steam turbines, built with the understanding that she could be converted into an armed cruiser if necessary. The British government had subsidized her construction with that condition in place. By 1914, Europe is engulfed in World War I. Germany and Britain tighten their grip on the seas. The Royal Navy blockades Germany, starving it of food and supplies. In response, Germany unleashes a new weapon, the U-boat, a hunter beneath the waves. In February 1915, Germany declares the waters around Britain a war zone. Any vessel flying the British flag can be sunk without warning. And then, they do something unprecedented. On April 22, 1915, the German embassy in Washington publishes a warning in American newspapers. The notice appears right beside an advertisement from Cunard Line, the company operating Lusitania. The message is unmistakable. Any ship flying the British flag entering the war zone does so at its own risk. Passengers traveling on such vessels are liable to danger. Many read it, few believe it. Lusitania is a passenger liner. No one believes Germany would dare sink a civilian ship carrying hundreds of Americans. On May 1, 1915, Lusitania departs New York Harbor. Crowds wave goodbye. Music plays. First-class passengers dine beneath crystal chandeliers, walnut-paneled walls gleaming softly as the engines hum below. Captain William Thomas Turner, 58 years old, seasoned and steady, receives warnings. German submarines are active off the coast of Ireland. He maintains high speed, because Lusitania is believed to be faster than any submarine. Because no U-boat can catch her if she runs at full power. But war does not operate on belief. As Lusitania crosses the Atlantic, U-20, commanded by Captain Walter Schwieger, has already left port in late April. 64 meters long, cramped, 27 crew members living among oil fumes, steel, and damp air. Schwieger is not reckless. He is methodical. In his logbook, he records every sighting, every torpedo, every ship sent to the bottom. By early May, U-20 has already sunk multiple merchant vessels. The Irish fishermen begin spotting smoke columns and debris drifting toward shore. On May 6th, Lusitania receives coded intelligence from the British Admiralty. Submarine activity strong off the south coast of Ireland. Exercise caution. No escort is sent. No patrol ships move to guard her directly. Some later documents suggest Britain allowed Lusitania to continue in order to expose German brutality. A dangerous theory. A political gamble played with civilian lives. On the morning of May 7th, the mist thins. Lusitania approaches the Irish coast. Passengers prepare for lunch. Children run through corridors. Some begin packing, knowing Liverpool is only hours away. 11 a.m., U-20 surfaces to recharge batteries. Through his periscope, Schwieger sees a massive plume of smoke on the horizon. A gigantic target. He submerges, calculates, waits. 1:40 p.m. Lusitania reduces speed because of fog and to adjust course into St. George's Channel. That decision strips the ship of her greatest advantage, speed. 2:10 p.m. on deck, passengers gaze at the deep blue sea. A woman tells her husband she finally feels safe. Land is near. Beneath the surface, less than 700 meters away, U-20 is in firing position. Schwieger gives the order to fire. A white streak cuts through the water. 10:30 p.m., a violent explosion rips through Lusitania's starboard side, just below the first-class staircase. Passengers are thrown to the floor. Glass shatters. Steam bursts from the boiler rooms. Seconds later, a second explosion, more powerful, shudders through the entire ship. No one understands. One torpedo should not cause two explosions. Lusitania begins to list to starboard. Fast. Too fast. Water floods through a breach over 3 meters wide. The engine room is swallowed almost instantly. Steam pipes rupture. Within 3 minutes, the ship lists 15 degrees. Launching lifeboats becomes chaos. On one side, they hang uselessly in the air. On the other, they slam violently against the hull. Passengers push and stumble. Children scream. Crew members try to impose order, but the decks are slick with seawater. Captain Turner shouts, "All passengers put on life jackets." Many never get the chance. 2:18 p.m. Just 18 minutes after the first strike, Lusitania slips beneath the Irish Sea, roughly 18 kilometers from shore. 1,198 people are dead. Among them, 128 American citizens. The sea grows quiet again. Wood fragments, luggage, and bodies float in the swell. U-20 disappears from the scene. In his logbook, Schwieger writes, "The ship sank unusually quickly. So quickly that the world cannot yet grasp what has happened. But this is only the beginning. Because that single torpedo does not just kill 1,198 people, it ignites a political storm that will drag the United States into the bloodiest war the world has ever seen. And what truly lies in the cargo hold of Lusitania may change the story entirely." The news crossed the Atlantic faster than any ship. On May 8, 1915, American newspapers ran black headlines across their front pages. Photographs of bodies pulled from the Irish Sea filled the press. The names of American victims began to appear. Businessmen, students, young children, families traveling for the summer. The entire nation was shaken. President Woodrow Wilson was still firmly committed to neutrality. He had been re-elected on the promise of keeping America out of Europe's war. But 128 American citizens killed by a German torpedo sent shockwaves through Washington. At the White House, telegrams poured in. Congress demanded a firm response. Former President Theodore Roosevelt called it an act of piracy. Crowds gathered outside the German embassy in Washington, furious, demanding retaliation. Germany responded immediately. Berlin declared that Lusitania was not merely a passenger ship. They insisted the vessel was carrying ammunition and war supplies to Britain, a legitimate target in wartime. Britain denied it at once. But the truth was more complicated. Shipping manifests showed that Lusitania carried roughly 4.2 million rifle cartridges, more than 1,200 cases of empty shell casings, and other military materials. All were officially declared as non-explosive cargo. Under international law at the time, when transporting ammunition on a civilian vessel was not entirely illegal, but from Germany's perspective, it made the ship a lawful target. A question began to spread. Was Lusitania truly innocent? The American media paid little attention to technical details. They focused on images of drowned children. Stories circulated. A mother clutching her 2 children as she leapt into the sea. A musician playing until the final moments. Survivors clinging to floating debris for hours. The outrage was no longer just emotion. It became political pressure. Wilson sent a sharply worded diplomatic note to Berlin, demanding Germany halt attacks on civilian vessels and provide reparations. Germany replied with cold logic. Britain's blockade was starving German civilians. This was total war. In the weeks that followed, the United States and Germany stood on the brink of confrontation. Within the American administration, fierce debates erupted. Secretary of State William Jennings Bryan resigned, believing Wilson's stance leaned too heavily toward Britain and could drag America into war. In Germany, Kaiser Wilhelm II understood the danger. Germany was not ready to face the United States directly. They temporarily scaled back unrestricted submarine warfare, promising to give warning before attacking passenger ships. But the fracture had formed. While politicians argued, another mystery surfaced from beneath the sea. Survivors insisted they heard 2 explosions in quick succession. U-20 had fired only 1 torpedo. So what caused the second blast? The first theory: the boilers exploded when cold seawater flooded in. The second theory: the ammunition cargo detonated. If Lusitania had carried significant explosive material, it would mean the British government had sent civilians into a war zone aboard a ship carrying military supplies. The British government sealed many records. A British inquiry swiftly concluded that Germany bore full responsibility. There was no deep examination of the cargo. Decades later, divers exploring the wreck found millions of rounds of ammunition and shell casings. No evidence of the massive stockpile of high explosives Germany had claimed, but enough to challenge the image of a purely civilian ship. The truth likely lies somewhere between extremes. In America, Lusitania became a symbol of propaganda. Recruitment posters showed a woman and child sinking beneath the waves with the words, "Remember the Lusitania." Yet in 1915, America still did not enter the war. Over the next 2 years, tensions escalated. In 1917, Germany resumed unrestricted submarine warfare, believing it could defeat Britain before the United States could react. They were wrong. In January 1917, the Zimmermann telegram was intercepted and revealed Germany proposing a military alliance with Mexico against the United States. At the same time, American ships continued to be sunk. Lusitania was not the sole reason America entered the war, but it marked a turning point in the national psyche. For the first time, the European war no longer felt distant. On April 6, 1917, the United States declared war on Germany, 2 years after Lusitania sank. When American troops landed in Europe, the slogan, "Remember the Lusitania," still echoed at rallies. A single torpedo in 1915 had created a wave that carried through 1917 and far beyond. And Captain Walter Schwieger? He was never put on trial. He continued commanding U-boats. In 1917, his own submarine struck a mine and sank. The entire crew perished. The sea does not choose sides. Lusitania rests at a depth of about 90 meters, her hull shattered, her bow angled toward Ireland as if still trying to finish the voyage. But the story does not end with politics or war. There is a deeper layer. Because Lusitania was not only the ship that pulled America into World War I, it was proof of how information, propaganda, and emotion can shape the decisions of an entire nation. And when truth lies buried beneath seawater and classified documents, history is written by those who remain alive. The final chapter will reveal what still rests on the ocean floor, and why more than a century later, Lusitania remains an open wound, 20 years after the disaster. A British diver named Desmond O'Donnell becomes one of the first to see Lusitania resting on the floor of the Irish Sea. The hull lies tilted, metal torn open as if ripped apart by a giant hand. No music, no crystal chandeliers, only dense darkness and twisted slabs of steel. But even in that first survey, something unsettles investigators. The starboard side, where the torpedo struck, is destroyed far more violently than expected. Steel plates bend inward, then outward. There are signs of enormous pressure originating from within. As decades pass, Lusitania becomes more than a wreck. It becomes a battleground of arguments. In 1967, an American businessman named Greg Bemis purchases the rights to the wreck. He believes the British government concealed the truth. He funds multiple dive expeditions, bringing cameras and modern equipment. The newly released images ignite controversy. Millions of rounds of ammunition remain packed in wooden crates. Shell casings lie clustered together, and in the 2000s, divers discovered detonators and additional military materials that had never been publicly disclosed, not the massive stockpile of high explosives Germany claimed in 1915. but enough to force a chilling conclusion. Lusitania was not entirely innocent. If the ship carried war materials, then it was not just a victim. It was part of the machinery of war. The story darkens further as declassified documents slowly emerge. The British government had known U-boats were active in the area. They had the capability to intercept and track German wireless signals. Yet Lusitania was not escorted. Was that an error or a gamble? Some historians argue that if a large liner carrying American passengers were sunk, American public opinion would tilt decisively toward Britain. There is no official proof that Britain deliberately sacrificed Lusitania, but the lack of protection, combined with the presence of military cargo, and keeps suspicion alive. Meanwhile, on the ocean floor, the wreck continues to decay. In 1982, a small internal collapse destroys part of the structure. In 1993, strong currents cause further structural failure. Each time the hull breaks, the secrets sink deeper. In 2011, divers report another 15,000 rounds of ammunition exposed after sections of metal gave way. In 2016, 3D sonar scans reveal that much of the internal structure has almost completely collapsed. Thus, the ship that once symbolized early 20th century engineering is now a broken mass of rusted steel. Yet its questions remain intact. What truly caused the second explosion? Some experts suggest that when the torpedo tore through the hull, cold seawater rushed into coal bunkers filled with fine coal dust. Coal dust mixed with air can explode with devastating force if ignited. Superheated boilers nearby could have created the perfect conditions. Another theory argues that part of the military cargo detonated in a chain reaction. There is no absolute answer. The wreck is too damaged to decode completely. But the consequences of Lusitania are undeniable. After the sinking, international naval warfare laws faced renewed scrutiny. The definition of a civilian vessel in wartime became more ambiguous than ever. The world entered the era of total war, where the line between front lines and home front nearly disappeared. Lusitania marked the end of the illusion that oceans could remain neutral. It also signaled the rise of modern propaganda. Images, personal stories, the names of victims, all were used to shape public opinion. For the first time in history, mass emotion became a strategic weapon. More than a century later, the wreck still rests there, about 18 kilometers off the Irish coast, nearly 90 meters deep. Waves pound against rusting steel. The gashes in the hull remain open like unhealed wounds. 1,198 lives, 128 American citizens. A ship nearly 240 meters long. 18 minutes. All gone, yet never forgotten. Lusitania was not the largest sinking in history, not the deadliest maritime disaster, but it stands as proof that a single moment at sea can shift the balance of global power. If Lusitania had not been sunk, would the United States have entered World War I so soon? Without the wave of outrage in 1915, would 1917 have unfolded differently? If political decisions had shifted even slightly, would the world map after the war look the same? History has no rewind button. Beneath the Irish Sea, Lusitania remains a reminder. In war, truth often sinks deeper than steel. And sometimes, a torpedo does more than destroy a ship. It sinks an entire era of neutrality. If you believe Lusitania was purely a victim of ruthless warfare, say why. If you think there are still truths hidden beneath the surface, share your perspective. Where do you stand in this story? Leave your comment below, because history is not only written by what happened, but by how we choose to remember it.